Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, we're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 and the ever-controversial Make Switch, or Make Flash. We've been talking a lot about the Make Flash recently, and the Switch 2 recently, because there's been a lot of news on the subject. Anyways, for those who may be unaware, here are the recent controversies for the Make Flash, and this is just the recent stuff. So it started out before the Switch 2 launched. Someone had their Switch 2 early, and someone, and this is just a rumor, I don't know if it's true or not, but someone had claimed that Make Flash bricked their Switch 2 system. It made their Switch 2 boot loop essentially bricking it. And then after that, after the launch of the Switch 2, there were some videos online of people trying to use the Make Flash in the Switch 2. The Make Flash was not bricking the Switch 2 at that point in time. It just seemed to not want to load any of the games that were on the Make Flash. And then Make Flash put out a statement saying that it worked with the Switch 2 absolutely fine, which people were debating. And then Make Flash put out some firmware to make the Make Flash work with the Switch 2 and showcase that the Make Flash worked with the Switch 2. And now most recently, it turns out that the Make Flash is bricking Switch 2 systems. So here is the tweet that's generating quite a bit of buzz. My Switch 2 test has been banned after using the Make Switch with perfectly legal dumps of my own cartridges. So it would seem that Nintendo can detect something. I strongly recommend that you do not use the Make Switch. It was already very risky to use it, but it's even more so on the Switch 2. There were obviously a bunch of responses to that tweet, and I don't know if this person is a Nintendo supporter or not, but they say here, unless you can prove you really dumped your own games and still have them, I see no reason to complain here. And the person who started out that initial tweet with their Switch 2 banned posted this image showcasing all of the Switch 2 games that they own, or just the Switch games they own. Well, there's one Switch 2 game there. Anyways, I think this is legitimate. I mean, I see no reason for it not to be. Now, I have seen a lot of speculation out there as to how this may have happened. Some people are saying maybe there were pirated games on that Make Flash and that's what's resulting in it. Some people were saying that it may be just a version of the Make Flash, maybe the newer version where you don't have to eject it, that's resulting in the ban. And the older version with the button may be fine. And then I've also seen some people suggesting that it may be games from different regions that your Switch 2 isn't registered to, and that's triggering the ban. And that one to me doesn't make any sense at all. And it gets even weirder here because the Make Flash is not the only report I've seen out there about people getting banned from using the Switch 2. There is a recent claim of someone having their Switch 2 banned by playing a used game that they purchased. And the leading theory on this one is that someone initially purchased the game and then dumped it and then returned the game. And that dump of the game may have circulated online and matches up with that used game that the person bought, which resulted in the bricking. So what I'll say here is that it's very hard to determine what's true and what's not. I mean, there's a lot of information flying around. Some may be true, some may be not. And even after some investigation here, it's really difficult to find out exactly what's true. But based on this information here, my recommendation would probably be to avoid the Make Flash at all costs. It's maybe a risk that's not worth taking, at least not using it on the Switch 2. And if you buy a used game, maybe try to get a receipt, because in the event that it's been circulated online and you get a Switch 2 ban, at least if you have the receipt, you can prove to Nintendo that you purchased the game legitimately. And maybe your Switch 2 will be unbanned, if that's even a thing. I don't know here. To be honest with you, I was debating on whether or not to report on this stuff because it's so hard to verify what's true and what's not. There's a lot of noise out there and not a lot of examples. We'll have to wait and see moving forward to see if more examples pop up and it does become a widespread issue. Who knows? I apologize if you're upset about that, but I mean, this is news. It's being talked about a lot, and a lot of people have been pinging me to talk about it, so here we are. At the same time here, I'm saying take a lot of this with a grain of salt and just exercise sound judgment and common sense. But switching to stuff we can confirm and continuing to talk about the Switch 2. Next up, we're talking about someone using a smartphone as a webcam on their Switch 2, and yes, it's possible. So to get this to work, it's not just USB-C to USB-C. They've got to use a USB-C to HDMI and use a capture card into the Nintendo Switch. And there is some lag, and I wouldn't say this is ideal at all. I'd say it's far from ideal, and I wouldn't recommend using your camera for hours on end on your smartphone device. But based on this, it seems like it would work. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but if you wanted to take a look at it and learn more about it, like everything we talk about, links are in the description below right at the bottom. I don't hide my sources. And I would say it may just be worth picking up a really cheap webcam to use with the Switch 2 instead. Now, unfortunately, I can't confirm which USB-C cameras will work on a Switch 2 and which ones won't. But I will say there are a lot of economical choices out there. For example, this one here, although I don't know if this one works with a Switch 2. But taking a look, this one is less than $20 and it's 1080p. And I would say this would cost less than the USB-C to HDMI cable and the capture card that person was using for their iPhone. I've also heard reports of Android needing a similar setup. So buying a cheap USB-C webcam may be the way to go. Let me know your thoughts about that one in the comments below. And speaking about low prices and maybe saving a few bucks, next up we're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 and a huge theft. So it's being reported that more than $1 million worth of Nintendo Switch 2 consoles has been stolen in Colorado. And that translates to, I think, just around 3,000 Nintendo Switch 2s. We're going to have to wait and see here if those Switch 2s ever get recovered, but my gut tells me there's going to be about 3,000 illegitimate Switch 2s entering the market, and who knows if Nintendo has a way of tracking those and banning them. But I'm assuming there will be a few people who end up with a banned Switch 2 without realizing that they purchased an illegitimate stolen one. That is, provided the stolen SKU numbers can be tracked. Who knows? And speaking about hardware, next up we're shifting from Nintendo to Xbox. And Xbox just had a huge announcement that they're partnering with AMD for their next generation of console. Not only is this a huge announcement for the partnership of AMD, but also for the next generation of consoles. And they're saying here this next generation is going to be fully backward compatible. Additionally here, they say they want to make Windows the #1 platform for gaming. And you may think, well, Windows is already the best platform for gaming. And you may be correct and you may be incorrect, and I can tell you it's not Linux either. Linux is gaining popularity, but if you take a look at the overall numbers, Android is actually the most popular. Now, without getting too off course here, I said Android and I probably should have said mobile, a combination of Android and iOS. Android is more popular than iOS globally, but at the same time, Android and iOS combined as a mobile global market share is pretty huge. 50% of the global games market value is mobile, 27% is console, and 23% is PC. Now, I could be wrong here with Xbox's strategy, but it'd be crazy to think they wouldn't want a bigger piece of the pie in the global market value. But if you take a look at PC and console and kind of merge them together just for Windows, that would take on mobile quite a bit. Either way here, let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. I think this is a huge partnership between Microsoft and AMD, and I think that's very good for AMD moving forward, especially for gaming. And on a quick side note, previous rumors had the next Xbox console at around 2028, and we'll have to wait and see on that one. Either way here, I am hoping that Windows has a better handheld experience overall. I'm hoping that Microsoft continues to develop in the gaming space. I think it's great for gaming and competition in general. And I'm curious to see where this partnership leads and if it makes AMD even better, although consoles are already using AMD stuff. I mean, PlayStation and Xbox already use AMD. Next up, we're talking about GOG, and to me, this one is extremely exciting. If you're not familiar with GOG, it's a great way to own DRM-free games. And their preservation program, at least to me, is extremely awesome. And they've just announced some brand new games for the preservation program on for a great price. So GOG has just added in the Devil May Cry HD Collection and Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition bundle. They've also added in DMC4 Special Edition on its own, Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3, as well as Leisure Suit Larry Reloaded. And there's even more stuff here like Earthworm Jim 2 and Star Trek Judgment Rights and even more. But let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. I mean, I for one am excited to see Devil May Cry HD Collection and Devil May Cry 4 added to the preservation program. I'm excited to see the preservation program grow, and I'm excited to see this stuff at a pretty significant discount, 67% off until July 2nd. And speaking about dates for things, next up we're talking about the Ayaneo Pocket S2. This is the handheld that's going to be featuring the Snapdragon G3 Gen 3, and we now have a release date. So the date for this one is set for June 18th, so pretty soon, almost That's today. So taking a look over on Indiegogo, and they seem to have a few different versions available. One has 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage for $439. Another one here has 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage for $499. I would say that's a way better deal. And they also seem to have a pro version of the Pocket S2, which has 16 gigs of RAM. And I think the battery's a little bit bigger here too, 10,000 milliamp hours as opposed to 8,000 milliamp hours. And 60 watts power delivery as opposed to 40. And speaking about releases, next up we're talking about Sega Saturn emulation on Android with Yabis and Shiro. I don't believe this has been implemented just yet, but it seems that Yabis and Shiro is about to get a brand new look and feel on Android. And speaking about new looks and feels, next up we're talking about Steam. Now this is currently in beta, but will probably be moving over to the stable version sooner rather than later. And this was released on June 17th, so yesterday. And that's regarding the in-game overlay. So they say here the in-game FPS counter is now expanded to become the in-game overlay performance monitor. It can display various more detailed information about frame rates, CPU performance, GPU performance, and more. Some data is only available on Windows at the time of this writing, and some information is only available on certain hardware. You will see an FPS counter like you always have at the lowest level of detail, but you can adjust detail and appearance in settings and in-game. The Steam Deck already has something similar, and I'm very excited about this, especially for benchmarking. I mean, let me know your thoughts about this one, but I find this information incredibly helpful to really fine-tune game settings to make it hum on PC. And speaking about game, next up we're talking about GameSir. And GameSir has just released a brand new controller here, and I might mispronounce this name, the GameSir Tegenaria Lite. And it is a wired controller, but it does feature Hall effect joysticks, and it's fairly inexpensive, $20. Now, I haven't checked this one out myself yet, but I'm curious about that D-pad and whether or not it's going to be good. But I mean, at the same time, for $20, I can see this gamepad being used as a Player 2 controller for a lot of different people. Or even a Player 1 controller if you're looking for Hall effect joysticks and a very low cost, provided you don't mind something being wired. And it does have rumble. It's got mappable back buttons and also more on this. To me, that's a very impressive or very attractive price point. And speaking about new stuff, or relatively new stuff, next up we're talking about Game Native. I find this project extremely interesting. They say Game Native allows you to play games you own on Steam directly on Android devices. This one is up on GitHub, and it's a fork of Pluvia, which is a lightweight, unofficial Steam client for Android with the ability to play DRM-free games from your account and chat with friends. And from my understanding here, Game Native lets you play DRM games. There's a whole bunch more information about this project over on Reddit Emulation on Android, and they say they've significantly enhanced Pluvia. So I guess Pluvia for DRM-free games and Game Native for DRM-protected games. I have not checked out Game Native yet. I can't speak for it. I can't recommend it. I can't not recommend it. It's just, it exists and I'm telling you about it. I'm usually nervous about entering my Steam information into a third-party program that's not Steam. So I would be a little bit leery about this one in general until I see some positive results and make sure everything's okay. Fortunately, it is open source. And last up here, we're shifting from open source to closed source, and we're talking about arcade emulation with TeknoParrot. And TeknoParrot just had a pretty big announcement. They say TeknoParrot now supports System 246 games via a custom fork of the Play emulator, fully integrated with auto-update support. So now live and playable is Bloody Roar 3, Tekken 4, Pride GP 2003, and Wangan Midnight. And taking a look, they say no config needed, just update TeknoParrot and you're in the fight race. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff, except the legendary one fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Feel free to discuss anything we talked about in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate, save your state.